You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
So I journey through releasing the need to find a savior and really claiming my power and feeling confident and comfortable and connected to myself, not just physically in my body, but emotionally and spiritually.
Welcome back to the Women of Value podcast. My guest today is Amanda J.P. Brown. She was a high school dropout and a drug user who struggled with shame and low self-worth. And through deep inner work, she discovered her value and went on to earn a college degree and 2 master's degrees. She became a writer and she wrote the book, You're Brave Enough, 8 Daily Practices to Be Your Own Hero. And today she guides women through their shame so they can stand confidently in their power. I just love that. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you for having me, Sandy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, our messages definitely align, just, stepping into your power, owning your worth. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show. So let's begin with, what does woman of value mean to you?
That's a beautiful question. For me, it really means being able to honor and see my own value without having to have it validated by anyone else. That I really own that I am beautiful, strong, powerful, and that I see that I'm capable of the things that I want to achieve. And without letting the outside tarnish or diminish what I feel inside. So that's how I see it, like really claiming who you are in like a holistic, everything all in way, even the things that for me, that I carried shame around, finding value in those things as well, because it's part of me and my story.
Yeah, so we're going to hear that story, and I love that you bring up the lack of external validation, because so many of us get our value from other people's approval, wanting to be liked by everybody. I see this a lot in the dating world, in my other job as a dating and relationship coach.
Yeah.
Where, it's then you get completely derailed by somebody saying something unkind to you or putting you down. And certainly the more visible you are, which is what happens when you step in into your value, the more you can be criticized. And so you have to learn how to honor your own value without needing approval from others.
Yes, absolutely. And that's like a struggle in so many ways because of the ways we've been socialized and how we're biologically wired. So really kind of that moving into that understanding of yourself and that you're valuable without anyone else's validation is so powerful and such a personal journey for each woman who experiences it.
I'd love to hear your story of how you claimed your own value, because going from high school dropout and drug user to somebody who's now helping people own their value, there's a story there. So tell us about that.
I was a kid who loved life, who was just vivacious and carefree, and we lived in the country. And then when I was about 9, we moved from the country into the city, and a lot of things started to change in my family, and a lot of things started to spiral, and just, we were around different people, and the culture of everything changed, and that really impacted me. And my parents started having problems, and there was all these things that I started to second guess about myself and to question about myself, especially, as I was coming of age and that 13, 14 age, which you're starting to question your identity already, and who am I relative to the world and relative to people and my family. And I had a huge rupture with my father, and it really spun me out of control. And who I identified as became really just damaged in the sense of like, I was no longer daddy's little girl. And then I started to spiral from there, and the drugs and dropping out of school and living the life that went with that took a toll. And for a couple years, I was really just lost, kind of, seeking other people's approval, trying to find someone to save me and make my whole life better. And maybe this would be the guy, and maybe this would be the person. And really looking for someone to tell me that I was valuable, that I was worthy, that I was lovable. And that can put you in some really precarious and difficult situations. And I found one day after a few years of this that I was no longer feeling good about myself, and I wasn't finding what I was looking for. In fact, everything was kind of validating those beliefs that I wasn't worthy, that I didn't deserve better. And I just didn't want to live like that anymore. So my story is kind of multi-step, to which I think everyone's is, to some degree, but I had this big awakening of, I don't really want to live this life anymore. And I had met a guy who was really great. He actually helped me a lot. See, like, just being able, sometimes while we don't need external validation, there are times in my life that having the perspective of someone else seeing what they see in me when it's supportive, was actually really helpful. So that's like an interesting dynamic if we were to explore that, right? But in that, my mom had found a school, and I had started, stopped using and started wanting to go back to school and get a job. And I ended up getting into a charter school that was at a community college, and I could take college credits as high school credits. And so I literally threw myself into school, and because I didn't trust myself and didn't really know who I was and didn't do any of the deep emotional healing work, I just kept going to school and kept going to school and kept going to school. And it was very helpful because it was structured and I felt safe there. And that is huge when you start your journey to healing, is feeling safe where you're at. Because the more that we feel safe, the more that we can start to uncover and deepen into those pieces of ourselves that make us uncomfortable at times. Because I hadn't done my work, I ended up that relationship ended, and I ended up in another relationship that was very toxic. We ended up getting married, and I found myself compromising more and more of myself to make the relationship work. So much so that the place that I had worked had done an anniversary party. I'd been there for 5 years for me. And I still feel it in my stomach every time because it was so powerful, is that I walked into that party and it was the all-American girl, red, white, and blue, apple pie and ice cream. And I was like, who is this wholesome person and party for? Because it's not me. And it was because I'd taken on so much of him. He was a military man, that's who people thought I was. And it was the day that I realized that I'd given away so much of myself that nobody knew who I was because I didn't see my own value and wasn't sharing it with the world. So that was huge for me. And that is actually where a little bit of the story started, in the sense of like wanting to do some work. And then it actually took another relationship. And for me to really want to deepen into this work, was when I started wanting to be healthier physically, which that actually helped me get into being healthier emotionally, spiritually, and really doing a lot of the work that has brought me into where I am now.
A lot to unpack here.
Okay, let me take a break.
It's a really it's a wonderful story of transformation, and I think that when you look back at your childhood first, let's go there.
Yeah.
And I think that when we want to remember our value, we look back and see, who were we? And some people don't even have that memory of carefree and happy and, you know, before everything started to fall apart. But you do have that person who you came back to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see this as a full circle story.
Yeah.
And yeah, just somebody who loved life and was carefree, but lost it all in the process of life, and went very far downhill to start climbing back up. And so that part I found really interesting, and I'm sure so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
The other part that I really want to speak to is looking for that external validation, which we talked about earlier. And that, you know, when you're doing that, you're really often losing yourself because you're becoming a people pleaser. You're shape shifting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
I can so relate to this. You know, I had the same experience of my life where I wanted a relationship to work, and so I kept trying to be the person who could make the relationship work.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I think so many people can relate to that, where it could be, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can
No,
be a job. It often is, right?
it is.
And it can be friendship. It can be so many things. And often it's all of them, right?
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. And that certainly was an experience I had too. And I think that, you know, I almost had, I don't know if this is true for you, but I felt so disconnected from myself that it was almost like I was always looking at myself from above, you know, where that there's that disconnect because it's a survival skill. Did you have that kind of dissociation also?
Oh, absolutely. I rejected so many pieces of myself and disconnected from so many things that I didn't even know who I was looking at from any direction.
Mm,
Absolutely. It was, you know, I joke about it now only because I've worked through it a lot, but I also have to be very aware that it's an easy pattern for me to fall back into is that
mhm.
shape-shifting chameleon. I can be anything you want me to be. And it's an incredible skill to be able to do that, but it's a very slippery slope to losing the essence of who you are. And for me, it can show up in very subtle ways. Absolutely, I experienced that.
Yeah, so let's talk about the process of, first of all, recognizing it. And because awareness is always the first step. So, what happens to you that has you aware that you're starting to slip?
I get really frustrated. And so one of the things is I start taking on too much and I start getting busy and so this is what starts happening is then I'm just like overwhelmed and then I kind of freak out. So then I just fall back in. So when I become stressed and busy and overwhelmed, it's easy for me to fall into that pattern. So I actually have to really be aware of how I'm feeling in my body. And that has actually not come easy to me. In fact, it was not until even recently that somebody asked me, a coach that I was working with, "Are you depressed?" And I'm like, "What? Like, what does that even mean?" Or
Mm-hmm.
anxious was another question. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means because I feel like I might just be living that. Now, I wouldn't say that I have like a mental health depression,
Hmm.
but I can be so disconnected or unaware of what I'm feeling that I don't even know because I just keep moving. So to cultivate awareness for me, I have to stop moving because if I keep moving, I can't connect with myself. So
Yeah.
that's a huge thing to even begin to get awareness. I have to be still, like
Hmm.
physically still and silent and just sit into that uncomfortable space at times. It's gotten much more comfortable over the years that I've done it, but noticing when I just keep moving there's something that's going on there for me.
This is such an important thing that we are so guilty of. I would say the majority of us are always moving, always doing, and numbing ourselves to our feelings. and we don't recognize what we're feeling. This is a big part of my practice, actually, because I was like that too, and I realized how important it was to just get quiet and feel what we're feeling. And because that discomfort doesn't last very long if you stop and feel it. It lingers when you don't. And this is like the sort of paradox of emotions, that when we really look at an emotion, it can last 30 seconds. When we push it back and push it down, it can last a lifetime, right?
For sure. Absolutely. That's and it's like that temporary discomfort we have to be able to settle with, like settle into without judging it. I think that's, one of the things in the work that I've done as a trauma therapist and working with children and families is helping people understand how was different emotions managed in your house. And it's not to blame anyone, but to understand that our parents or grandparents may not have been able to deal with anger or may not have been able to deal with sadness. And so because of that, we bottled up those emotions and didn't show them or don't know how to be with them because nobody showed us how. And so it's even kind of understanding that we have to learn how not to judge those things about ourselves, and that every emotion we feel is okay. We're allowed, and I don't want to give permission to, but we, as a part of being human, it's very natural to feel anger and sadness and grief and loss. It not just this continuum of happiness and joy all the time. That's not real. Not everybody, we go through this emotional experience in life.
That is so, so true. And I love that you're speaking to the permission to have emotions and not to feel bad about them, because especially now we're taping this during the pandemic, and I would say now more than ever, there are people who are dealing so differently with isolation, with the quarantine, sheltering at home. It brings up so many different feelings, and they're all valid. And we often feel guilty that we're okay, or bad that we're feeling angry because we're healthy. So it's balancing that, what seems like opposing emotions, which don't really make sense to us. They really are all valid, and we need to give ourselves permission to feel them all.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to a couple of women in my group this morning about those very things, of like that feeling of emotion, and one was feeling anxious and the other one was feeling kind of guilty and a little shameful that she wasn't struggling with this, that it didn't really change her life because of the work she does and stuff. And so even just processing that and knowing that everyone's experience is different, as and not judging it. I think that's the huge piece. So absolutely. And those are real conversations that we need to have, because when we don't, we keep those things silent. And that's what kind of continues to create that shame and judgment.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're helping other women with that too. So you're talking about your process. So you realize that when you're ever stressed or overwhelmed, don't fall back into the pattern, stop moving, be silent, connect to your feelings, don't judge them. What else do you do or have you done to stop the pattern of people pleasing and shape-shifting?
One of the big things for me is journaling and really kind of connecting with myself, and really asking some tough questions. So it's been a struggle for me to get back into writing. I had put it away a long time ago for so many reasons, including what if somebody read it? What if somebody found it? But one of the things that I've uncovered is I'm a processor. So I need to talk about things. I need to write about things. I need to process them, and I need a safe space to do that. So a huge thing that I've realized that I do need, and this has taken many years to, one, see, and two, ask for, because asking for help can be very hard for me. As many women that I know struggle with this because of all those underlying stories, is finding a safe place with a safe person to help me process those, to support me through that part, to be able to witness me, to hold me without even having to say anything. And that has been one of the higher steps that I've taken, is really being able to get to the place that I can acknowledge that that's what I need, and then allowing myself to receive that. Which is also very loaded, is that ability to let myself receive the support that I need. So I have to recognize it and then be able to ask for it and then be able to receive it. It's like this huge process of bravery and courage to be able to say, I'm valuable even though I need help. I'm worthy and strong and capable, and yet I need help. And that's coming to that process through journaling and through seeking the support. Reading books has been really powerful for me. So there's been a multi-layer level. And then when I had no words, one of the other huge things for me is doing collaging and experiential kind of art things, because sometimes there are not words. And so like being able to do collaging or even dancing really just helps me connect with different pieces of myself.
I think that a lot of people discount the creative aspect of ourselves. They think they have to be some kind of big artist or dancer in order to dance. And I think there's so much power. And again, it's reconnecting to a different part of your brain that
Yes.
isn't, just trying to fool us into analyzing things and getting into that, I must do this and this is the right thing to do. And the other thing that you brought up that I just want to highlight is asking for help, because so many of us think that's weak. You're giving somebody else a gift when you receive.
You are. And I think that's one of the things that I had to understand, is that when people offer to help, they're offering because they want to, many times, not necessarily out of obligation. Because a lot of times I'm offering when I see somebody in need out of like pure wanting to help, not out of obligation. Like, don't get me wrong, sometimes I do things because I feel obligated. But that's a whole different part of that story, right? This is really about being able to give that gift, like you said, to people, because a lot of times they want to be able to support you. And so recognizing that and allowing yourself to receive is really uncomfortable. I can totally relate to her because I feel that way sometimes too.
Steve Harvey once had somebody on and he was giving her a compliment. And she turned to him and she said, I received that, Steve. I received that. And I was like, we have to say that more often.
Yes. Yeah, I have gotten into the habit through some of my work of when I would be like, oh, like pushing it off. Somebody said to me one time, you can say, or not you can say, but she was like, one of the things that my teacher taught me was to say, thank you for seeing me.
Ooh,
And
I like
so that really landed for me when somebody gives me a compliment that I may not be feeling that day, is just to be able to receive it by saying, thank you for seeing me.
That's really nice. I love that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I love that other one. I'm going to start using that as well, because I love that. I
Yeah,
received.
we tend to diminish so many things like apologies. It's okay, no problem. When we're really, really upset with a person, don't
Yeah.
make it just okay, it's no problem. It's not okay. And so just, having the courage to be you, to own your worth, to, not feel like you have to diminish something you're feeling in order to make somebody else feel better.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things and lessons that I've learned, is that whole realness and honesty, is that the more that we are honest with ourselves and how we're feeling and acknowledging that, the more we can give that to other people. Because it's really, I had this experience with my current husband where still fell back into that shape shifting. Oh, you like that? I like this. But it was so subtle. I didn't think I was doing it until years after. And then all of a sudden one day I realized, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Those aren't really the things I want to do. That isn't really me. He enjoys it. So I enjoy it because it brings me joy to give him joy. And so one day I had to go back and I was doing the work and had to say, I bet you think I lied to you about who I was. And he goes, absolutely, I do. And I was like, okay. I never meant to do that, but it was this like pivotal moment of like being able to share a piece of myself and really be honest. And like, honesty is so important about how we're feeling. And it could be as simple as somebody asking you, oh, how are you doing today? And we're so automatic to say fine, but we don't have to say fine. We
No.
can say something truthful without going into the whole story, right? Because we might not want to do that, but we can be honest in little ways every day in our life, which is like with ourselves. And so that's so powerful.
Being able to ask for what you want is vulnerable. Being able to show up as yourself is vulnerable and courageous. And being honest with people about what's working, what's not working, it's all really about being brave enough to be vulnerable and not just be what we think other people want, and it does take courage, but it also takes a large degree of vulnerability and not having to look perfect out in the world.
Our idea of what someone wants from us or expects us, because a lot of times I've found that is, what I think someone wants is just what I think what they want. It's not actually what they told me. It's my perception of that situation. And so then I mold into that, but it's not necessarily something somebody said you need to be this way. And so even recognizing that we adapt based on just our sense of feeling of what we need to do. But that vulnerability piece is huge because it takes so much courage and it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable, because many of us have had experiences where maybe being honest or real in our lives or speaking up for ourselves, we could have been attacked verbally or worse. So we've learned over the years that maybe that's not the best strategy, but yet it's also the most freeing. The more that we can be vulnerable and we can take those risks in our life to really show up authentically and as who we are, the more I've found that people see me for me and don't have those expectations that I'll do things that I actually really don't want to do, because I've let them see who I really am. And that makes it easier to have better boundaries, because people don't expect that from me anymore because I'm not doing it. I'm not showing up that way. It's being able to get comfortable, like we said, with those emotions. It's being able to get comfortable in that discomfort of what it feels like for temporarily. I think Brene Brown talks about that too. Really being able to settle into the short period of discomfort of vulnerability versus stuffing it and having a lot more discomfort for an extended period of time. She says it much more eloquently.
Yeah, I know. It's just all pointing to not losing yourself again. I mean, you talk about the disconnect and when you're showing up as something else to please others and you're not honest with how you feel. I mean, that was a lifetime before you stepped into your worth. And, I talk to clients all the time who are on the verge of this process and they really want to show up more fully. They don't know how, and they want this to be done in like a month, why is it going to take 6 months for me to go through this process? And I'm like, you spent 6 decades going to, getting to where you are today. And with continued practice and new habits, you can certainly change your life, but it takes time to build new practices and to create those new neural pathways
Mhm.
Right. So let's talk about your book, which I know, you take us through your own process. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it and what did you write about?
I wrote about bravery and being your own hero. And really, this was the process of sharing my story and really owning who I was. I was really scared a lot of times to talk about my experience with drug use. And I felt a deep, deep sense of shame. And in fact, sometimes I still don't talk about it right away with people, right? I let them get to know me, but I'm much more open about who I am now and let it be a natural piece of myself versus this like secret that I'm holding that what if they find out? So I had been working with a coach for a while and she'd asked about what's your superpower? And it really stuck with me. And it was in that process that I knew I needed to share my story. And it was the story around shame and drug addiction and really kind of holding my head down and really kind of feeling less than everyone else, even though I'd done so many incredible things and so was so far away from that experience and that 16 to 19-year-old girl. I think I was in my mid 30s at the time. So that, I mean, it was, almost 20 years since that had happened. And I was still allowing that to control me. So I really kind of started writing my story around that. And I took my superpower, which is the 8 practices, which make up the acronym HERO, as what I needed to do to own who I was and to share who I was. It still took a couple years for the book to evolve, but then one day it was just like, you have to write this book. And then it just poured out of me when I finally started allowing myself to sink into that and deepen into that. This was something that I was being called and asked to do, not just for my own healing, but for the healing of the many other people in the world who needed something like this. So I journey through releasing the need to find a savior and really claiming my power and feeling confident and comfortable and connected to myself, not just physically in my body, but emotionally and spiritually. And the 8 practices, and they're in sequential order because it makes sense, right? Our logical brain likes sense, but really you can enter these practices at any point in any way. A lot of times, multiple of them have to be happening at one time to support each other. And so it goes through the process of being honest. So honesty, honoring yourself, um, empathy, exploration, risk, realness, and open-hearted ownership. And really, I walked the process through of like, I had to be willing to be honest with myself about the journey I'd walked, the places that I'd been, the experiences that I had. I had to honor every single one of those and really fall in love with them, because the more that I can honor that person, that girl who made all those decisions, the more I can love her and the less I judge her, because I've really found that honoring someone and judging them just can't happen at the same time. I had to have empathy, like really give her empathy that she was doing the best that she could at the time, and really kind of holding her very sacred and holding her experience and really seeing her in that vulnerable way. And then the process, and this is a lot for me, is that exploration, being able to ask the questions, to sit in that discomfort, to journal or be seen, really explore all of the things that I didn't want to look at, like all the dirty, disgusting, like things that I felt about myself or beliefs that I had, like really being able to sit in my own darkness and work through my shit. That was like really powerful. And all of that is risky because it's requiring me to show up vulnerably. It's requiring me to be seen and be heard and all of those things. But in that, there's this whole aspect of realness, that really taking off that mask and being able to let people in, that is so powerful because it's freeing to me. And through that process, this open-hearted ownership, like in order to take ownership, obviously we're not responsible for other people's actions if they harm us. we are only responsible for how we react and allow things to continue to impact us once we've moved through those experiences. So a lot of times with ownership, we have to really come at it in an open-hearted and loving way. And so I walk people through that process to really find their own power.
It's a great process. I like that it's an acronym so people can remember it, and it's all really powerful and valuable, and I love it. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Let's go to the lightning round, where we're going to learn some more about you with some really quick questions, and then we're going to wrap. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
The first word that came to mind was good. It wasn't good enough.
Yeah. The number one thing holding me back from becoming a woman of value was?
Myself, my perception of myself.
I like that you added perception of yourself. I think that we are not only the one holding us back, but we're also the one who can pull us back to our power.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are afraid to look and to admit that they're part of the problem. And what they don't realize is they're also part of the answer.
Absolutely. That is one of the hardest things, is to see where you may have contributed to any of the situation you're in.
Yeah.
But it's also the most liberating, because it means that you have the power to change it. So absolutely.
Yeah. Got to create the life you want. So speaking of that, what is the best advice that you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
Oh, that's a great question. Really just begin the work wherever you're at, and there's no wrong place to do it. So if you want to start it by getting healthier because you want to eat different, start wherever you want. There is no right or wrong. The only thing that really matters is how you move through your journey, and that you choose how that happens. And that by allowing yourself to choose instead of looking for someone else to tell you, you will be more empowered. And just really just ask yourself, does this feel right in my bones? And if it doesn't, then move on.
Yeah, that's really powerful and also really elusive to so many, because we often grow up thinking we need to get the answers outside of ourselves, just like we need external validation to own our power.
Yeah.
And nobody knows us better than ourselves once we really tune in.
Right.
And
absolutely.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a speech once where the running refrain was, "You have the answer," and I had to make a really, really tough decision. And especially with tough decisions, we often look to others, but you can listen to others and then make your own decision, right?
Absolutely. That's probably one of the things my mom would tell you, is she would tell me what I should do, but then I would go experience whatever I needed to. And then 6 months later, I'd be like, well, I tried it all my ways. I think I'll do it what you suggested in the first place. But I had to really experience it my own way first. And I think that's really important to know, to use that. For me, I call it discernment, of hearing and allowing other people's wisdom to guide you, but to really at the end of the day be able to go, is this really for me or not? And so that whole level of discernment, which does take a lot of practice to do.
It does. Yes. Trusting you and your own inner wisdom.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Don't give up. Don't give up. No matter what, just keep going, and know that you are loved more than you could even imagine. And that there's more than this for you.
I love it. And finally, Amanda, how would you like to be remembered?
That's such an interesting question. I really think I would like to be remembered as the person who never gave up on herself or others, who always saw the potential and capacity in everyone. I believe everybody is capable of change and living the life that they want, no matter who they are. And that I just want to be remembered as somebody who continued to do that work and continued to reflect the beautifulness that I see in other people, and holding that space for them to find that within themselves.
Well, I received that. I just think that's beautiful. And it's so important to have people who cheerlead for us and who are the beacon of that for others, the role model of someone who's done the work and is on the other side saying, here's who I am. I'm continuing to work on myself, but I've been able to transform. And if I can, you can too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I always tell the women that I work with, I'm just a guide walking my own path next to you. I am not walking your path for you. So I'm here. And I'm sorry, that's my dog. But I'm here.
Your dog is here too. And your dog is saying, I agree.
I agree. Yes. That I'm walking with you, but this is really your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on the show today and sharing your very powerful story of transformation, of becoming your own hero, and really showing people that they can do it too.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor and pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.